or topic, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. Stay tuned. Herbally Yours will be right back.
Of course my kid's in the right car seat. Well, I think he is.
Yeah, my kid's in a booster seat. He was ready to move up. He is ready, right?
Her car seat looks like the right size.
There are probably rules on when to move up to a booster seat, aren't there?
Rear facing, forward facing. I think I have it right.
Car crashes are a leading killer of children 1 to 13. Are your children in the right car seat for their age and size? Don't think you know. Know you know. Go to safercar.gov/the right seat.
I know my child's in the right car seat, or else I wouldn't get in the driver's seat.
Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
And welcome back. You are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. And I'd like to remind you that you can join us live on ground, not only on air, by going to naturalnurse.com calendar, and you'll see all the places that we interact with our listeners in person. And upcoming November 5th, right here at the Huntington Hilton, is the Naval Expo, where there will be literally hundreds of lectures, presentations, and all kinds of giveaways at the table. And you can learn more from our local holistic providers, MDs, NDs, naturopathic physicians, DOs, nurses, acupuncturists, licensed massage therapists, an entire array of people deeply involved in natural medicine. And today we have as our guest Karen Howard, the Executive Director of Organic and Natural Health Association. A very good place to look for information is at their website, nutrientpower.org. And also, we're talking about testing your levels. And you know, Karen, you threw out a bunch of words that not everybody might understand, although you and I do. You talked about D2. What is the difference between D2 and D3?
Well, the easy way to remember that is that D2 doesn't work and D3 does. But the reality is that D2 is often it's led as D2 is a plant-based vitamin D. And the reality is that you really need to take D3, and then when you take D3, you need to be. I know once you know what your D level is, you can start to explore how much you need to take. So I think the daily recommended allotment is about 400, and the reality is that for me to get my vitamin D level from 38 to 58 took 2,000 IUs a day. So some of these levels that are also recommended or the dosages on the bottles are also not helpful. So my guideline is always, one, know your level, live life well that way, and then do source a really good D3. They're very common. Most of them are synthetic. Very few of them are naturally based. That's just the way of the world. You just can't eat your way to a good vitamin D level, and most people don't live the lifestyle to be able to stay outside with most of your skin exposed 30 minutes a day, 3 times a week.
And, you know, I wonder about that because I live in Florida, and a lot of people there really do get quite a bit of sun exposure. They're playing tennis, they're out there swimming, they're walking. We're really very active there. And yet, when we get the D levels measured, it really is still lower than optimum.
Yeah, I did some research on Africa. I found the same thing. There were only small pockets where people had sufficient vitamin D levels. And I think it's a couple of things. One is that we're all really trained to wear sunscreen. So the fear of being out for 30 minutes without sunscreen pretty much prevents people from doing that. Somewhat of a disservice that has been led to us through the dermatology world because you can be out 30 minutes. Certainly everybody's a little different. Obviously, somebody really fair would have trouble with that. And lifestyle, just in general, most people don't get that opportunity to be out either on the golf course or playing golf. And even me, I run most days, and it's usually around that, high sun. And mine still wasn't high enough either. So it's just a function of how we live these days and what our weather conditions are in our lifestyles. And
I'll tell you another little thing. When we look at the mechanism of action of the transference of vitamin D, once it goes into the skin to the active D3, which you discussed as the kind of D that we need, there is a whole mechanism of action that occurs going from the skin through the liver. The thing is, if you take a shower within 24 hours after exposure, it stops a lot of that mechanism. And that's interesting as well, because most people will really take a shower within 24 hours of the time when they've been sunbathing. So there's many factors that that interrupt it. So now tell us a little bit more about omega-3, because that's another big focus of the organization that you're working with in terms of organic and natural health.
So this is a huge health issue. 80 to 90% of the world's population is deficient in omega-3, and really, it's only populations where culturally people are eating cold water, fatty fish. Think Alaska, Japan, places like that, where that's just a habit. People eat that instead of what we eat, which is French fries. So having a high omega-3 level is really important because it's an anti-inflammatory agent in that regard. And most people, we have omega-3s and we have omega-6s, and we want those to be sort of equal ratios in our body. But the reality is that the omega-6s are contained in all the processed foods that we eat, and subsequently our ratio can be as high as 20 times more omega-6 than 3, and that really sets you up for a lot of healthcare concerns. So that's one of the reasons that we're really promoting omega-3. Also, not universally tested by any practitioner group that I've been able to find, including naturopathic doctors.
That's true. And you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse, and my guest today is Karen Howard, Executive Director of Organic and Natural Health. And we will also post this on the archives if you're hearing this and are interested and like to listen again or tell a friend. So that's always available for you. Now, Karen, you're talking about omega-3s, and then you mentioned another term that perhaps people are not familiar with, but what I think is important is you mentioned krill. That's Krill. What is that?
It's a great little crustacean that lives in the very cold oceans of the world. And it's harvested by a group of companies that have collectively come to understand that they need to harvest with great sustainability and marine biology in mind. So in many ways, it's the food for whales. And in many ways, it might be the most sustainable solution to being able to support having more and more people have an omega-3 level that's sufficient. Because it's hard to get those omega-3 levels. If you don't like sardines and mackerel and wild salmon, you're already at a disadvantage. So people who move towards fish oils are looking at those salmon and cod liver oils. And we all know sometimes these things fall into shortage areas. So one of the things I like about krill is its level of sustainability. The other thing that I think is interesting about krill is that it's actually closer in color to wild salmon than any other fish oil. So if that's one of our best sources, I find that just really intriguing. It's smaller. You don't have to take as much. There's research being done now in terms of how your body processes krill and whether it's actually having a higher effect in terms of being able to increase your levels faster. So the companies are all looking at that. So it's a very interesting nutrient, and it's one that I'm now taking every day. I'm anxious to see. My omega-3 levels were pretty low. They were like around the 5, and you want to be at 8%. So in a couple of months, I'll be able to test again and see if taking all of this krill oil has made a difference.
Well, also, like you said, the capsule itself is very small and does not tend to repeat on people like other omega-3 supplements do.
I always tell people, if you're taking an omega-3, and sometimes you'll start off, and maybe you'll go to your practitioner and you'll start off with a really high-quality product, and you go, oh, here's something that's less expensive. If you have an adverse reaction and you are burping up and it's tasting fish, throw that away, because that should never happen. You should have, your product should be clean enough that is just not happening. That's not a very good indicator of a quality product.
It's interesting, too, you mentioned salmon, because so much salmon on the market is farm-raised, and now, of course, they released the first certified GMO animal product, which are these giant, fast-growing GMO salmons. And how would anyone know which one they're getting because they're not labeled?
Yes. I have a niece who says, you have lots of rules. What's the most important thing for me to know? And one of them is, don't ever eat farm salmon. That's my perspective. I won't hold any of you accountable for that. But the reality is that, farmed fish, and I'm not sure there is such a thing as well-farmed fish, it's just not going to be as healthy and contain the level of omega-3s that you want. I always counsel people, if you want to eat salmon, eat wild. Yes. I have my own favorite company. I love Vital Choice Seafood. You can get it online. It's really high quality and sustainably harvested.
Right, and we can see what you talked about in terms of that color. When people think of that salmon color, which krill has, that a lot of the farm-raised salmon really is not that color. They just feed it artificial coloring agents to change the color of the flesh.
Yes.
So there's a lot of differences that you really need to be aware of. So how can people access all this testing that you've been sharing with us?
It's all available. When you go to nutrientpower.org, you'll find lots of links that'll explain more about the testing. The reality is it is a self-funded. I pay $99 to be a part of the study, and I'll get tested. And I'll get this really amazing report back that really shows me where my levels are in relationship to not just everyone in the test program, but also the general public, and how that stacks me up in terms of my health risk. So it's a real personalized nutrition view of my body and those particular nutrients. So it's available there. You get great discounts to help offset the cost of participation on krill and vitamin D. So for people who are not certain about how to source that, we hope to solve a couple of those problems for them. But yeah, nutrientpower.org.
That's really, really good. And what few steps would you share with listeners, since you've been on this health journey and advocacy about access to natural health care? What would be some closing comments for our listeners?
As much as I would love to tell everybody the supplements that they need, I don't know that for them. So I always say, move more, sleep well, and really pick your foods with thought and care. If you pay attention to your body, it'll kind of tell you in the grocery store what it is you want to eat, and stay out of those center aisles. So if you reduce your amount of processed foods and increase your fruits and vegetables, you're halfway there.
Well, thank you so much, Karen Howard, and you can find more at nutrientpower.org. And thank you for tuning in to Herbally Yours, produced at the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamhi at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.